Greetings and welcome back to Pseudo's journey through the Japanese air tech tree in War Thunder, a series of subpar guides made for unskilled free-to-play players by an unskilled free-to-play player. Today we shall be having a look at the first bomber, that is technically classified as a light bomber, in the bomber line of the Japanese air tech tree, the Ki-32. The Ki-32 can be found at battle rating 1.3 of rank 1 in the 5th line of the Japanese air tech tree. Before we get any further, let's have a quick chat about Japanese bombers. Japanese bombers have never been known for their massive ground ordnance or durability. If you remember, the war in the Pacific was primarily fought over the Pacific. Absolute shocker, that. As such, most Japanese bombers were not built for massive carpet bombing missions. They were intended to be much more agile bombers with ordnance specifically suited for ships, and they generally focused on having much longer ranges than many other similar bombers at the time. While these things were all quite practical in the real world, in War Thunder's current game modes, this makes Japanese bombers some of the least effective bombers in the game due to their light armaments, low armor, and small bomb loads. Despite being fairly different from the other bombers in the tech tree, the Ki-32 still exemplifies these traits. The Ki-32 has some decent characteristics for a bomber. Even for a true light bomber, it has slightly above average maneuverability in a turn. While you shouldn't expect to win any turn fights against designated turn fighters, you can easily outmaneuver interceptors or shake slower and lightly less maneuverable fighters off your tail for a little while. I will note that you do drain speed very quickly in a turn and also turn into an absolute boat in a dive, so don't rely on prolonged turn fighting an enemy or diving away to escape. The engine is relatively weak, but it will suffice for this tier. The climb rate is also only decent, but it's better than most other bombers of the same rank. However, this is mostly negated by an air spawn in Air RB, meaning that you will get quite a decent allowance of energy to use as you see fit. Due to your light airframe, you can get nearly any base you want despite the weak engine. The durability of the Ki-32 is very hit or miss from what I've found. The plane can take a large amount of damage from light MGs at this BR, compared to other Japanese planes at least, which I will admit to be a very low bar. Occasionally, I've had enemies sink numerous rounds into it without much of an issue. Other times, I've had a single shot cause me to burst into flames. There are some armaments at this rank which will tear you apart. Any fire caused by enemy shots will also cause your plane to fall apart. The mechanization of the Ki-32 is as simple as it gets. You have a fixed landing gear, so landing should be quite easy. You have combat, takeoff, and landing flaps to play around with. The combat flaps are nice for quick turns if someone gets on your tail, but not much else. They rip at about 550 kilometers per hour, so no real worries about that. The wings and gear both rip at about 600 kilometers an hour, which also shouldn't be much of a problem except in very long and steep dives. I will once again note that the Ki-32 becomes relatively hard to control in a dive, so I wouldn't strongly recommend it as you might not be able to pull up as fast as you think you can, even though your plane could theoretically handle it. Unlike most bombers in the Japanese air tech tree, the Ki-32 does get a 7.7mm Type 89 machine gun as offensive forward armament. However, this gun has a number of problems. Firstly, the Type 89 machine gun is the same one used on the Ki-10 and other early Japanese planes, and is incredibly weak, if not the weakest in the entire game. Not only that, but you have a paltry 200 rounds of ammunition for it. With the slower fire rate of the weapon, getting a single hit that is anything more than a glancing blow with the forward gun is nearly impossible. This is all accentuated by the fact that the singular gun is relatively far out on the wing of the aircraft. I found myself actually having an incredibly hard time aiming, as I never really got a feel for how off to the left of the plane the gun fired. For all practical purposes, this gun is good for nothing but scaring enemies away. The Ki-32 does get two 7.7mm Type 89 dorsal machine guns. As both of these are also the Type 89 machine guns, they suffer from the same low firepower and low rate of fire of the main gun. Due to the placement of the gunners, at least one of them can fire almost directly behind the plane. However, the overall angle in which they can actually fire seems to be incredibly small. They can do a bit of damage to people flying directly behind you, but I wouldn't rely on them for anything too crazy. I will note that while a lot of people at this BR will fly very close behind you in a straight line, becoming easy targets for you, the machine gunners will likely be the first place on your plane to catch around, so you should start doing some small maneuvers to throw off the aim of anyone behind you right after you see them. On to the main usage of our literal bomber, the bomb load. The Ki-32 can carry either 9 50-kilogram Army Type 94 GPHE bombs or 4 100-kilogram Army Type 94 GPHE bombs. The 50-kilogram bombs will require direct hits on most enemies to kill them, but they can do a little bit of damage at this tier in large numbers. The 100-kilogram bombs are good at taking out most ground targets at this BR, though they will require a deal more accuracy than the 250-kilogram or 800-kilogram bombs that you might find at this rank. I found that the 400-kilogram bombs are just enough to take out one base, so once unlocked, you should always be using the 100-kilogram bombs in both ground and air battles. The bombs are actually fairly accurate due to the bomb scope and the slow speed of the Ki-32. Low-speed, medium-altitude bomb drops should be performed in ground battles, and low or medium-speed, high-altitude bomb drops should be done in air battles. A final quick note about the bombs is that the bomb bay door takes a little while to open, so always remember to use your keybind for it, or your multifunctional menu if you are a Forsaken console player like myself, to open it before attempting to drop any of your bombs. The playstyle of the Ki-32 is quite simple. In air battles, it should be used as a high-altitude base bomber. Feel free to dive down a little bit to gain more speed than the other bombers, select your base, and drop your bombs. If done correctly, you shouldn't have any trouble gaining whichever base you desire. While you can choose to engage an enemy after you drop your bombs, I can't recommend it too strongly. Enemy bombers will likely take you out with their gunners before you can do any damage to them with your Pitbull forward gun. Most enemy fighters will likely be able to drain you of your energy and probably still won't get taken out even if you dump your full ammo pool into them. In my opinion, just land after dropping your bombs. In ground battles, fly a little bit higher over the combat zone than you might otherwise. The Ki-32 is very slow and relatively flimsy, so you will be a favorite target upon which any AA systems at this rank will feast. However, higher drops mean less accurate drops with your 100-kilogram bombs, so I strongly recommend picking enemies that aren't moving. Possibly even drop 2 of your 100-kilogram bombs on them to cover a bit more area. With the 60-kilogram bombs, feel free to use your whole supply on one target. While you still most likely won't get a kill, it will feel absolutely awesome as you watch the 9 explosions quickly creep towards the enemy. While flying the Ki-32, it's best to just avoid most other enemies. While you can take a bit of damage, there's very little chance that you'll be able to escape or actually take out any enemies while flying this plane. Especially be careful of enemy planes that have air spawns or any semblance of firepower, as they will most likely tear you to shreds. Overall, just try to be a less appealing target than the other bombers of this rank by flying higher and further out of the direct path to enemy bases. Also, do be very careful of ground AA while flying the Ki-32 out as CAS, as they can pick you off fairly easily if you get too close. Try to approach the battlefield at more unusual angles so they won't expect you and shoot you. Landing and takeoff in this plane are pretty much as easy as it gets. While you don't get an air brake, you do have fixed landing gear, so you can land pretty hard, though the brakes aren't the greatest, so you might take a little while to slow down once on the runway, so make sure to land a little bit slower than you might otherwise. Takeoffs are fairly easy, as despite the fact that you are a bomber, you are a quite light bomber, so takeoffs won't be as long as many other heavier fighters or bombers. The visual aesthetics of this plane are a little bit goofy in my humble opinion. The fuselage is very square, resulting in the entire plane looking like a rectangular prism with wings. It looks like the sort of plane you'd make out of Duplo blocks before you were old enough to use Legos without swallowing them, resulting in a very simple plane mostly consisting of large squares and square-adjacent shapes. It only has the single paint job, which is somewhere between light green and light tan, which is incredibly mediocre to look at. It's just a bit bland. Nothing good, nothing overtly horrible or migraine-inducing. The cockpit of the Ki-32 is an utter disgrace. Remember, I really never play first person, so this is all a subjective view from— No, cut the disclaimer. It doesn't matter how much I've played first person. I can tell without a shadow of a doubt that the cockpit to the Ki-32 is the most disgusting cockpit I've ever seen. It is completely unmodeled and looks like it came out of a PS1 game with no updates whatsoever. The gun sight is also shameful, but it is at least better than the gun sight of the Kika. You'll probably have a hard time hitting shots with it, as it takes up a lot of your field of view well zoomed in. The price of the Ki-32 is pretty cheap, as it should be for a plane as painfully just below mediocre as this one. It costs 2,900 RP to research and 700 SL to purchase. The crew train cost is 200 SL, bringing the total cost to buy and train the crew to the Ki-32 up to 900 SL. The repair cost is 197 SL when fully spaded. Compared to some of the other 1.3 BR planes, this one is actually pretty cheap, so if you want a really quick and easy plane to get early on, this one is a decent bet. For the modifications, it's best to rush the bombs so that you're stuck with the 50 kilogram ones for as short of a time as possible. However, they're in rank 2 of your modifications, so you'll have to get something from rank 1 first. I recommend getting the fuselage repair, and then the modification for the 100 kilogram bombs. Then get the engine injection, cover, and airframe modifications for speed and durability. Then get the forward armaments, followed by the rest of the performance upgrades, and then the dorsal gunners. The total cost will be 2,970 RP and 890 SL, which isn't too pricey, but the modifications besides the bomb one really won't help you too much either. That's all I have for you on the Ki-32. Overall, it's an acceptable plane for its BR, though the other dive bombers at the same BR typically do the same job better, so its usability in both air and ground battles is up to debate. I'd be honored to see you next time, where we'll be looking at the Ki-45 Toryu, one of the first true interceptors that you'll find in the Japanese air tech tree. There are 4 variants of the Ki-45, the Te, Otsu, Ko, and Hei. Despite the fact that they are all at different bow reigns and aren't even all folded together, we'll be covering them all at once in one video. I'm not entirely sure how that'll work yet, but I'm sure I might figure something out. Whether you're there or not, I thank you for tuning in today.